Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast Sleeper Edition. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, riding solo today. I want to give you guys my top 12 sleeper picks ahead of the 2022 season with fantasy football draft season firmly in the air. So if you listen to podcasts regularly, you probably heard these names before. But again, with drafts this weekend, next weekend, I mean, my goodness, 13 freaking days until we get that opening kickoff. Just thought I would double down, remind you guys, these are the 12 players with an ADP outside the top 120 picks. First 10 rounds that I consistently find myself drafting myself, and I just believe that their prices are rather egregiously mispriced at the moment. So generally, when we're thinking about a player, we got the personal talent, the offensive environment, the workload, and matchup strength of schedule consideration. Clearly, after 120 players are off the board, we're not going to be able to check all those boxes, but in some situations, we still might have some players that are at least elite in one or two of those, and maybe the rest of those boxes can eventually be checked down the line. So with that said, everyone, here are my top 12 deep round sleepers ahead of 2022, starting off with my favorite late round quarterback, really the only true late round quarterback out there this year. That is Chicago Bears quarterback Justin Fields. If Trey Lance falls outside the top 120 picks, which seems, like wishful thinking, top 90, top 100, maybe top 120, probably not. Go ahead and get him. But otherwise, I just think it's pretty tough to get away from Justin Fields, my QB 14 ADP, QB 17. And guys, we have this fallacy, I guess is the right word, in the fantasy industry, where I think we have a wrong feel of what exactly constitutes a safe quarterback. We look at these, the Aaron Rodgers, the Kirk Cousins, the Derek Carrs of the world. We've seen them throw the ball enough and just be average enough that we consider them safer than someone like Justin Fields. I'm not so sure. I think you could argue Fields has both a higher floor and ceiling than those guys, thanks to his freaking legs. Now, I know I'm not the first fantasy analyst to ever say that backing dual threat quarterbacks is a good idea, but the numbers really are astounding, guys. Over the past decade, only 12 quarterbacks have had at least 125 carries in a season. 11 of them went on to finish as a top 12 quarterback per game, not just rewarding the guys that started 16, 17 games out here. So yes, 2020 Cam Newton, QB 17. You could argue that, his weapons, are pretty similar to what Fields is going to be dealing with in Chicago. But again, having just that potential floor of Fields touching 130, 140, 150 rush attempts, PFF projection for 140. I just think it's going to be very hard for him to bust on that alone. God forbid we actually see him throw the ball pretty well, which, he low-key did during the final 4 weeks, final 4 games of 2021 when he actually ripped off 4 straight top 12 finishes. Running back from the Los Angeles Rams, Darrell Henderson, my RB 43. Also going off the board is the RB 43. This isn't one of those where I'm just super far ahead of the consensus, but I'm happy to be in line with him and buy him at this price. So last year, weeks 1 through 12, without Sony Michel really, factoring in with Cam Akers out of the picture, Henderson was the RB 15 in PPR points per game, RB 11 in expected points per game. So we really have seen Sean McVay, whether it was Gurley, CJ Anderson, Cam Akers, Darrell Henderson, even Sony Michel for stretches, he's always really given his lead running back this workhorse role. Now, that could be in line for Cam Akers this year. If it is, we have Henderson going quite a bit after guys like Alexander Mattison, especially Tony Pollard, guys that we really aren't expecting all that much standalone value on a week-to-week basis. I know Pollard maybe a little more than Mattison, but just from a pure handcuff perspective, I think Henderson being in an offense with Sean McVay, who has shown repeatedly that he's willing to turn over the entire backfield, the one guy, if he doesn't trust the other pieces in there, I think RB 43 for that alone is worth it. But we might not even have to worry about that. We could actually have one of the rare instances where there is legit standalone value in this backfield. Based on some of the reports out of Rams training camp, we could finally see Henderson and Cam Akers splitting things more so in a 50-50 manner. So if that happens, great. We could be looking at, Henderson being someone that you're not thrilled about putting in the flex, but you can kind of do it. And then we also have that handcuff upside on top of it. So, mention this in my 10 tips to, dominating your fantasy football draft video, but that really will be the common theme with these running backs. We want guys that, no, we're not going to be probably ranking in the top 24, on a weekly basis, but top 36 is more than possible. And they have that opportunity to boom into the top 15 at the position if just one injury happens. Next player is Indianapolis Colts running back Nyheim Hines, my RB 35, still going off the board just as the RB 44. So, guys, I really think that in this offense with Matt Ryan, Frank Reich's talked about getting Nyheim Hines more involved. Like, he's had the potential to be this J.D. McKissic guy that can catch, 60, 70 passes. I think Hines is arguably better than J.D. McKissic from a pure real-life talent perspective. The issue with Hines has always been what happens if Jonathan Taylor gets injured? Will he actually, take a big leap up and be the feature back? In the past, when Marlon Mack would get injured, Jordan Wilkins would kind of take that early down work. In the preseason, when Matt Ryan's been out there, obviously they're resting Jonathan Taylor, but it has been the Nyheim Hines show. Phillip Lindsay has not been a factor with the first team offense in the preseason. I think Hines, low-key, guys, could be like the 11th round version of Tony Pollard, where Jonathan Taylor goes down. No, I don't think Hines is going to be out there getting 20, 25 carries per game or anything like that, but he doesn't need to. If we can get Hines into that Austin Eckler sort of role with a JT injury, that's where we could actually see him supply some upside RB1 value that, again, before seeing him really get every single one of these reps with the first team offense, I just wasn't sure that was in his range of outcomes. So Hines has always had a nice, PPR friendly floor, but that ceiling, I believe, is going understated. And I love this RB40 range of running backs. Another one, Detroit Lions running back Jamaal Williams, my RB45, going off the board, ADP RB49. So yeah, DeAndre Swift will be the lead guy when he's out there, but in 10 games together, guys, Swift, I believe, had 103 carries. Jamaal Williams was at 102. So Swift gets the fantasy friendly targets, but we could legitimately see Jamaal Williams, I'd say 12 to 15 combined carries and targets per game, maybe 10 some weeks when Swift's healthy. And without Swift, we did get 3 examples last year of Williams racking up 20, 18, and 19 touches, even while he was playing through a lot of injuries. So I do think if Swift gets banged up, Williams could be looking at 20 plus touches per week in an offense that seems to be ascending. I mean, my goodness, I can't remember a more popular sleeper throughout this entire offseason than the Detroit Lions. They're everyone's favorite sleeper at this point. But yeah, if we were trying to pick who could be this year's James Conner, the guy that is a touchdown dependent RB2, RB3 type when the whole backfield is healthy, but then all of a sudden ascends to a legit RB1 because they just take over the backfield with one injury, I do think Jamaal Williams could be that guy. Pow. Chicago Bears running back Khalil Herbert, he and Alexander Mattison, I was concerned about their handcuff potential because it's a new coaching staff. And guess what? As we're seeing a little bit with Cole Kmet, especially with Albert O, when we do get some of those descendants from the Green Bay coaching staff come down, I guess Madison's different with the Rams, but you guys know what I'm saying. When we have a new coaching staff, we just can't assume the roles and the workloads are going to be the same across positions. In Herbert's case, though, every single first team snap with Justin Fields throughout this preseason, on the back of reporters saying really since earlier in the summer, but then throughout August as well, that Herbert has a big chance to actually make this far more of a two-back committee than it's been in the past. So we've seen some pass protection woes. I do think Montgomery is going to have enough targets in this offense to still be the clear lead back, even if Herbert does manage to carve his way into some usage. But watching these two guys run last year, it did seem like Herbert had a little bit more going for him, particularly in some of these games where putting up over 100 yards against the Buccaneers, like this was not a highlight film where you're just seeing, the Jaguars and Texans over and over again, like some guys out there. Herbert was earning those yards. And once again, probable, not someone you're thrilled about putting in the flex, but maybe someone you can, stomach putting there when you have some bye weeks and legit RB1 upside if David Montgomery goes down. Those are the running backs. So Khalil Herbert, Jamaal Williams, Nyheim Hines, and Darrell Henderson. Again, the old flex with benefits, if you will. Wide receivers now. Similar thing. We're looking at the wide receiver 3s mostly in offenses because the wide receiver 1s and wide receiver 2s are gone at this point. Again, guys outside the top 120 picks, wide receiver 3s that are one injury away to either guy from ascending. This is not a commonality in every single NFL offense. A lot of times, if the number 2 wide receiver gets hurt, the number 3 wide receiver doesn't necessarily see their targets boom. They just kind of still keep the same role. Maybe the wide receiver 4 steps up, or maybe the RB2 comes in and gets more action. Maybe they run more 2 tight end sets. It's much more difficult to identify the sort of handcuff wide receivers as opposed to running backs, but there are a few, most notably Cincinnati Bengals wide receiver Tyler Boyd, my wide receiver 45 going off the board. Wide receiver 50, Dwayne and I did a draft yesterday. We're at wide receiver 60 out there. So, guys, here are the 12 games that Tyler Boyd has played without Jamar Chase or T. Higgins over the past 2 seasons. PPR wide receiver 5, 9, 10, 15, 17, 20, 28, 31, 36, and 2 duds, 51 and 63. 17-game pace of 117 catches, 1,224 yards, and 6 touchdowns on 147 targets. Tyler Boyd will immediately be in the wide receiver 2 conversation if either Chase or Higgins get hurt. And if they don't, I think wide receiver 36 is probably pretty fair. That's exactly what he's finished in PPR points per game in each of the past 2 seasons. So draft players closer to their floor than ceilings. Tyler Boyd is going well below his floor, and I think his ceiling is being understated. Also, love Arizona Cardinals wide receiver Rondale Moore. Who's the most likely guy to take Christian Kirk's slot role? Rondale Moore. Who's the most likely guy to take Chase Edmonds' design kind of RB gadgety type attempts? Also, Rondale Moore. Maybe after 6 weeks, DeAndre Hopkins does come back. They put Rondale back in the gadget role, and they play freaking AJ Green and Antoine Wesley ahead of this guy. But even in that scenario, we're talking about a wide receiver going at pick 161 outside the top 60 wide receivers. Even if we get 6 weeks as a featured player with Kyler Murray under center, I think you could argue that's enough for that price point. And guys, I really think the ceiling here for Rondale Moore in an offense where Kyler, especially last year, like don't forget that we weren't all that thrilled about DeAndre Hopkins even before he got injured because of how much Kyler was spreading the ball around. I think we could see Rondale flirt with those 100 targets that have been, there for Christian Kirk and the slot receiver in this offense and get potentially 20 rush attempts. So we don't want rush attempts to replace targets, but if they can be added on top of the existing starting slot receiver role, that's what the fantasy friendly stuff we're looking for. Washington Commanders wide receiver Jahan Dotson. We've gotten I was on Jahan Dotson in the summer months because I just never understood the disparity in ADP between him and some of these other first round wide receivers. I'm aware Carson Wentz is the quarterback, but you know what? Like Zach Wilson throwing to Garrett Wilson. I love Jameis. I'm not putting him in this group. He is coming off an ACL, throwing to Olave, who's got a little more target competition than these guys. Jameson's got the knee injury. So you really needed to go, with all due respect to Ryan Tannehill, you needed to go in the second round to really find any of these rookie receivers that were just dropped into the amazing situation. Obviously, that's Sky Moore and Christian Watson, but we're seeing both of those guys even struggle to crack their 3 wide receiver sets. Meanwhile, Jahan Dotson, not even 3 wide receiver sets. He's already ingrained as the number 2 in this Washington offense. Curtis Samuel seems like the guy who will only be out there on the field in 11 personnel. So with Jahan Dotson, man, I just think that people have typecast him as a slot receiver because of his size. That's not what I saw going back and looking at what he did at Penn State. It's not what our NFL draft team saw either when they were as high on him as they were. And just to see him go off the board 16th overall selection, that should be a positive that Washington thought of him that high, not a negative because the mock drafts we were looking at in April said that this was a reach. So Logan Thomas come back from the pup. I just think that, maybe more Brian Robinson out there instead of J.D. McKissick. There are a lot of easy pathways for Dotson to easily have over 100 targets and to get someone like that outside the top 60 wide receivers. Like Wentz is clearly already being baked into that price. Buffalo Bills wide receiver Isaiah McKenzie, my wide receiver 52, ADP still wide receiver 78. I've talked about this where like guys, top 10, 11, 12 rounds, you don't want to make big reaches on ADP because it is a situation where these guys are probably going to be there for you if you're looking at someone going 12 or 24 picks past where you're drafting. Once you get to round about 12, 13, that range though, once we're kind of looking at a bunch of wide receivers that aren't exactly starting already, and then the running backs are just pure backups at that point, that's when guys like Isaiah McKenzie, you should feel free to go out there and get, because we're looking at the starting slot receiver with Josh motherfreaking Allen under center. And look, this is an offense that was first in total targets to wide receivers in 2021 and second in 2020. Cole Beasley, 3 straight seasons with 100 targets in this role. And McKenzie arguably offers, at this point in time, just higher upside than Beasley thanks to his overall yak ability. So Jamison Crowder could still make things tight, but wide receiver 78 off the board for McKenzie right now. I want to be in some of those drafts. So with this one, I am trying to be ahead of the curve. Normally, I like to stick my rankings a little bit closer to the ADP because, again, McKenzie obviously in round 14 is better than him in round 13. But I just think that this breakout here, this is the perfect situation, the preseason, where we're not just saying, oh, look at McKenzie's training camp highlights. Look at all the good things they said about him. This is a situation where he's rested with the starters. He's gotten the usage on top of the hype behind the scenes. That's the perfect marriage here in fantasy football land in August. 2 guys from the Chargers. We want guys in great offenses with full-time roles. And I think both wide receiver Josh Palmer, my wide receiver 63, and Gerald Everett, my tight end 15, fit that bill. Already murmurs from the Athletics' Daniel Popper that Palmer could just fully kind of displace Jalen Guyton in 3 wide receiver sets. And if he doesn't, again, one of the premier handcuff wide receivers out there. 3 games last season with a snap rate north of 60%, caught 5, 5, and 4 passes, 43, 66, and 45 yards, scored a touchdown in each and every game. So betting on Palmer and betting on Gerald Everett is betting on Justin Herbert. And that's what I want to do at these prices. 196 and 182nd players off the board overall per Fantasy Pros consensus ADP. I just think these are 2 more players priced far closer to their floor than their best case ceiling. So in Everett's case, if we're trying to find the 2022 version of Dawson Knox or Robert Tonyan from a few years ago, we're looking at a tight end with a starting role in a freaking awesome offense where we could see a quarterback finding a way to throw 8 to 10 touchdowns to this guy despite only targeting him 60 to 70 times potentially. There's obviously other guys in this offense available. That's why Gerald Everett's available and going off the board as the tight end 2022. But the 4 tight ends I think fit this bill: Hayden Hurst, Gerald Everett, Irv Smith, and Tyler Higbee. Those are my favorite candidates, and arguably Robert Tonyan as well, to emerge as this, again, the 2022 cheap late round tight end who just gets a boom from the touchdown upside. So don't discount, this contract for Everett. 2-year, $12 million deal, $8 million guaranteed. Last year, Jared Cook got 1 year, $4.5 million, and saw 83 targets. So Gerald Everett with 80 plus targets from Justin Herbert going outside the top 20 tight ends. Sign me up for that. Final one, everybody. Minnesota Vikings tight end Irv Smith Jr., my tight end 11, now going off the board as tight end 16. The full-time role has not changed. The number 2 tight end is Johnny Munt, who was the full-time blocker in the Rams offense, led by new head coach Kevin O'Connell for the Vikings. Irv Smith still projects to have the Tyler Higbee every down role here. Still somehow just 23 years old. No, it's not great that he had to have thumb surgery in August, but we've already got confirmation that he's fully expected to play in week 1. So Irv Smith is someone that we kind of saw being priced just in the muddled tight end 2 range, but by the time early August came around, he had moved up into the top 12. It's wild. I was talking to Underdog's Hayden Winks right now. Like, you could argue tight ends like 15 through 19 when you have guys like Everett, like Irv Smith, and oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the other one, and David Njoku. Those guys, for some reason, we're still seeing Albert O as a tight end 12 or Underdog. We're seeing Noah Fant hyped up as some other sites. Like, really be careful in this tight end 2 range, because just blindly following some of those ADPs, not making much sense to me right now. So Irv Smith, Gerald Everett, my 2 favorite tight end 2 targets right now. Some quick honorable mentions: Dameon Pierce and Brian Robinson. I don't think they qualify. Their ADPs are just shooting to the moon. I mean, my goodness, Dameon Pierce, have we ever seen him and Jesus Christ in the same room before? Shout out to JJ Zachariason for that lovely joke on Twitter. Brian Robinson, someone that obviously starting over Antonio Gibson, I would draft him 1 spot ahead of Antonio Gibson at this point. I do think the answer is probably just no. Isaiah Pacheco, still think he projects to be a number 3 back in this offense. I think his whole ascension was more so just signs that, hey, we probably shouldn't be as high on Ronald Jones than necessarily we need to be higher on Isaiah Pacheco. Samaje Perine, free in just about any draft. If you don't need to draft a kicker or defense in round like 18 or 19, I think Perine is one of the rare guys that could be there. And God forbid something happens to Joe Mixon, all of a sudden we're looking at 15 to 20 week 1 touches. Basically, with the Chiefs offense, we know Juju and MVS are locked into 2 wide receiver sets. Okay, why is Juju going so much higher than MVS? I'm fine throwing a dart at the former ex-Packer. Some more number 3 wide receivers with the potential to boom up to number 2, but just not quite as sure. Jalen Tolbert. We got to worry about Noah Brown a little bit. He's more so been the star at Cowboys camp. KJ Osborne in Minnesota. Talked about Irv Smith getting the full-time role. Same thing with Osborne and KJ Hamler in a condensed Denver Broncos passing game. Obviously now with Tim Patrick out of the picture. Also want to shout out Nico Collins, looking like the Texas number 2 pass game option behind only Brandon Cooks. And we also have actually George Pickens, Romeo Doubs getting all sort of training camp buzz. I do wonder exactly how the volume is going to be, though. David Njoku, a lot more fun without the Deshaun Watson suspension, obviously, but still full-time role with that money. I'm still okay taking him at the end. And finally, mentioned Hayden Hurst as another one of those potential options. So real quick, guys, just to quickly sum that up. How many times can I say quick in one sentence? We will see. Chicago Bears quarterback Justin Fields, my favorite sleeper at the quarterback position. Running backs, I got Darrell Henderson, Nyheim Hines, Jamaal Williams, and Khalil Herbert. Wide receiver, Tyler Boyd, Rondale Moore, Jahan Dotson, Isaiah McKenzie, and Joshua Palmer. Tight end, Gerald, Everett, and Irv Smith. My favorite sleepers with an ADP going outside the top 120 in fantasy drafts of all shapes and sizes at the moment. So hope you guys learn a thing or two. Go target these guys in the later rounds. Again, a lot of examples of guys just being priced far closer to their floor than their ceiling. So hope you enjoy this edition of the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Ian Hardison. Until next time, take care, everybody.